Hey everyone, this week we will be exploring the world of the Texas Legislature. Takeaways from the chapter: you should be able to describe the structure, size, and general characteristics of the Texas Legislature, explain the qualifications and member demographics, explain how legislators are elected, including single-member district method, describe reapportionment and redistricting issues in Texas, understand the various leadership positions in Texas legislature, and finally describe the legislature's functions and procedures. Let's talk about the size and structure of the Texas legislature. The Texas legislature is bicameral, consisting of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Remember, bicameral means two. The Senate consists of 31 members elected to 4-year overlapping terms. The House has 150 members elected every 2-year terms. So as soon as you get elected, you start running again. Both are small relative to the state's population. As of 2019, there were about 935,000 constituents per Senate district and about 193,000 per House district. The size of the legislative body can have a negative and positive effects. Texas's relatively small Senate, compared with the House, it's considered more genteel and free of individual domination because so few of them have to work together to get legislation passed. The general characteristics of the legislature, the sessions and session lengths. The legislature meets in biennial sessions, meaning every 2 years in odd number years. The sessions last 140 days, so you pretty much have to have a very flexible job if you wanted to be a state representative, right? Sine die means the legislature must adjourn at the end of the regular session, and unlike a majority of state legislatures, cannot call on extraordinary sessions or otherwise extend a session. So all your business has to be done within the 140 days. This strengthened the governor's veto power. The governor may call a special session of no more than 30 days each, right? He is the only person that can extend the legislature by 30 days. The biennial session helps the legislature avoid reacting rashly to particular situations. Qualifications and demographics. Formal qualifications. For the Texas House of Representatives, you have to be a U.S. citizen, at least 21 years of age, a resident of the state for 2 years, and the district for 12 months. If you want to serve as the Texas Senate, you have to be a U.S. citizen, at least 26 years of age, a resident of the state for 5 years, and in your district for 12 months. Candidates for office must be qualified voters. They cannot be convicted of a felony. Informal qualifications have greater importance. For example, legislators tend to be older, male, well-educated, and professional. Cultural changes have led to greater diversity. Many of the legislatures are paid over $7,000 a year plus $221 per diem while in session. So per diem is like per day. The least of legislators in the 10 most populous states. Many legislatures are attorneys or other successful business people with other significant sources of income in keeping with the traditionalistic political culture. It is difficult to serve unless independently wealthy, employed with a flexible schedule, or otherwise financially supported, right? So this limits the pool of who represents you and I. Legislators who retire at 50 with 12 years of service or 60 with 8 years of service gain a pension. So if you wanted to run for elected office at the state level, you're going to get a pension from there if you held office for 12 years plus your regular job. So that's not a bad deal. The amount is linked to the salary of state district judges. Single member versus multi-member district. Members of the Texas legislature are elected from a single-member district, districts represented by one elected member to the legislature. A party or candidate need to win only a plurality of the vote to win one seat, and districts can be drawn to the advantage of minorities. Unlike multi-member districts, which promote majority representation or domination, single-member districts promote geographical representation. How the 31 Senate districts and the 150 House districts are determined has been highly controversial. The Texas Constitution requires that the legislature reapportion legislative seats following the federal census, right? The federal census happens every 10 years. Reapportionment means the process of allocating representatives to districts. Redistricting is redrawing of district boundary lines. Each interest group tries to gain as much as possible, existing powers trying to protect their advantages, and incumbent legislatures trying to ensure re-election. Equity of representation is not a new issue. By 1948, most urban counties in Texas were vastly underrepresented, leading to the creation of the Legislative Redistricting Board with the authority to redistrict seats if the legislature failed to do so. Representatives shifted somewhat, but disparities continue. Two cases brought to the U.S. Supreme Court forced all states to redistrict based on population. The first was Baker versus Carr in 1962, and the second was Reynolds versus Sims. The general rule is that the maximum population deviation between the largest and the smallest must be less than 10%. Right, so your population can't be over 10% in either the Senate district or the House of Rep district. Minority representation. Legislative districts should not only be approximately equal in population, by law they should also allow for representation of ethnic minorities. And the 1981 battle over redistricting in Texas ended with the federal courts imposing a redistricting plan that created majority-minority districts containing a majority of ethnic minorities. Similar battles took place in the 1990s and in the 2000s. Minority voters have become better represented in Texas. The minority candidates have gained many legislative seats in the legislature. So make no mistake, each political party in Texas participates in the redistricting battle. Because representation is about power. It's about keeping resources and redistributing resources at its fundamental. Gerrymandering is the drawing of district boundary lines for political advantage. Political gerrymandering is the advantage of one political party over another. Racial gerrymandering is creating minority districts. In 1980s, Republicans supported racially gerrymandered majority-minority districts. In 1996, the U.S. Supreme Court found against using race as the predominant factor in redrawing lines. In 1999, in Hunt v. Cromartie, the court found political gerrymandering was permissible. Reapportionment after 2000 census gave Texas 2 additional seats in the U.S. Congress. In 2001 session adjourned without a new redistricting plan. The Legislative Redistricting Board drew the districts that favored Republicans. The U.S. congressional districts were drawn by a special federal court, and in 2002, 5 districts that heavily favored Republicans were instead won by Democrats. So sometimes redrawing of districts to favor one political party really doesn't work. In 2003 session, Republicans worked to redistrict the 32 U.S. congressional districts. The battle led to pressure to drop the Senate's 2/3 rules requiring 21 members to agree to consider a bill, and 11 state senators fled to New Mexico. Fighting over districts continues after the House and the Senate passed different bills. The new map, finally accepted by both houses in October, was successful in giving Republicans a distinct advantage. In 2004 election, the Republicans gained 5 U.S. congressional seats. So make no mistake about redistricting. Each political party maneuvers to gain the advantage, right? So Democrats have done the redistricting fiascos, as have the Republicans, because this is about power and losing power. It's not about you and me electing officials. It's about maintaining those in power, right? Texas gained 4 seats in the U.S. Congress from the 2010 census. 3 maps should have been drawn. Maps drawn by the legislature had to gain federal approval or pre-clearance, and the maps were found to be potentially discriminatory in nature, launching a series of legal battles. In the landmark case Shelby County v. Holder of 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court found pre-clearance unconstitutional. The redrawn maps now in place have had significant impact on partisan minority voting and on districts once considered safe for incumbents. So what does this mean? So anytime a state legislature redraws the district, they no longer have to get federal clearance on it. They can just draw it however they want. And it's incumbent upon the voters in the state to fight the battle of whether or not they determine it to be inequitable. Leadership positions in the Texas legislature. The formal leadership positions possess considerable power to decide the outcome of the legislation. In Texas, power is concentrated in the hands of two individuals, the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor. In addition to their regular legislative duties, both have other extra legislative powers. For example, they can appoint members to serve as boards of state, such as the Legislative Budget Board. Second, they can serve as members of the Legislative Redistricting Board. The Speaker of the House. The members of the House elect the Speaker of the House, who serves as a presiding officer and generally controls the passage of legislation. Incumbent speakers are almost always re-elected. The House agenda is controlled through formal rules that allow the Speaker to appoint committee chairs, members of standing committees, and members of other committees, to preside over all the sessions and to refer bills to committees. The lieutenant governor is elected by the voters for four-year term, right? The state representative or the Speaker of the House is elected to that position within the 150 members, right? The lieutenant governor is a statewide run race, and so all of us as an at-large state, meaning everyone in the state of Texas, votes for him or her. They are not formally a senator and cannot vote in the Senate except in the case of a tie. He or she appoints the chairs of Senate committees, selects all Senate members, and appoints members of conference committees. Why are conference committees important? Because they are the committees where the different parties come together to hash out differences. So everything in that bill, every sentence structure, every period must be the same. He or she serves as a presiding officer and interprets the Senate rules, and he or she refers bills to the committees. The lieutenant governor must ally with key senators to effectively utilize the powers of the office. Standing committees established by House and Senate rules consider legislation during the session. Conference committees work out differences in bills passed by two houses. The temporary committees study special problems. Interim committees study issues between sessions. The chairs of the standing committees have powers similar to those of the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor. He or she decides the amount of time devoted to bills and which bills get attention to that committee. Here is a table that allows you to look at the different standing committees in the Texas Senate, the 86th Legislature. Administration, culture, business, so on and so forth. So there are a variety of committees for every specific issue. Here is a table of the standing committees of the Texas Legislature, the 86th Legislature, and again, any particular interest or business or bill that could possibly come from the state is reflected in this legislature. Functions lawmaking. The legislature's two branches have as one of their main functions the responsibility to create, alter, and enact the laws for the state. A bill is proposed law or proposed change to a current law, such as the revenue bill that must begin in the House. All other bills can begin in the House or the Senate. Bills must be passed by both chambers to become law. Because Texas must have a balanced budget, each bill must have a fiscal note explaining the cost if adopted. Resolutions are another method of lawmaking. Concurrent resolutions convey the sentiment of the legislature, request information from a state agency, or call on Congress for some action. They must pass both chambers and require the governor's signature. Joint resolutions. They propose constitutional amendments. They must pass both chambers but do not require the governor's signature. Simple resolutions. These deal with measures that concern only one chamber, such as the adopted rules and honor constituents. They need only pass one chamber and do not require a governor's signature. So it's somewhat symbolic. One of the most essential laws is the biennial budget. The legislative budget boards recommended budget and the governor's executive budget are consulted. So they're two separate budgets. The governor proposes one, and then, of course, the legislature proposes their budget. The Senate Finance Committee and the House Appropriations Committee create the budget bill, which passes to the comptroller before being sent to the governor. So more than likely, the legislature really doesn't take into account the governor's budget because they're the ones that pass laws, they make laws. The Texas legislature establishes the state sales tax and can establish additional taxes. Procedures. All legislatures have formal rules of procedures. They prescribe how bills are passed into law and ensure the process is orderly and fair. It makes it difficult to pass laws, ensuring careful review, but also preserving the status quo. In Texas, legislative rules protect the ruling elite and enable them to control the legislative process. The governor has 10 days to sign or veto a bill after receiving it. The only exception is during the final 10 days of the session. Then the governor has 20 days. So conclusions. The state legislature are generally influenced by the social and economic conditions in the state. The state legislature waits for other agencies, groups, and individuals to bring issues to them for the resolution. And the state legislature tends to represent local legislative interests and not statewide interests.